Hi everybody, Jeremy here, Modern Vitality. In today's video, we're looking at mastering your circadian rhythm. This is part 2, and we're looking at the clock. And we're also going to be looking fractally because we have the circadian clock for the day, right? But time also moves in larger units. For example, the week, the month, the year. How about the human lifespan? We're going to be breaking all this down in this video and more so that you can have a deeper understanding of some of the underlying architecture that your body is requiring to heal. If you're dealing with chronic Lyme disease, fibromyalgia, mold exposure, chronic fatigue syndrome, candida, Epstein-Barr virus, long haulers, there's a ton of these. Adrenal fatigue, all these conditions that are now so prevalent, anything autoimmune, you need to understand yourself in a deeper way so that you can start to get better, because the medical system is not going to do this for you. I'm sorry, it's just not. You got to learn. You got to take charge of your health. That's what we do here. All right, let's get started. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the circadian rhythm. And if you haven't already, I would recommend go back and watch part 1, where I explain temporal arbitrage and how not all hours are equal and hours don't slide. These are important concepts that you need to know so that you can make the most of what I'm going to be explaining here. So we have the circadian clock, and we have this idea about, okay, I need to wake up earlier in the day, get some sun exposure, some ambient light that helps to set up my circadian rhythm, right? I want cortisol rising in the morning and then steadily kind of tapering down. I want to be able to wind down in the evening, not be staring at my phone and all these other toxic lights, right? And start to get into a deeper sleep and an earlier bedtime so that I can be rested, right? Because each day kind of feeds to the next. We've got this, right? If you don't already have this understanding, that's a wonderful place to start. And there are a ton of resources online about circadian rhythm. But why I'm making this video is to go deeper. We want to go deeper than that. And we need to understand how to arbitrage our time so that we're doing the right things at the right time to get the most results for our body. And of course, also as we heal, like doing the right things at the right time so we can be more impactful in the world, which I spoke about in the previous video. Before we get into the chart, if you are struggling with a complex chronic health condition, you don't have to do it alone. We have a wonderful group. It's free to join. It's full of people all over the world who are going through the same kind of process, trying to overcome complex chronic health conditions. We've got a vault full of interactive videos. You can ask me anything in there. There may be a bit of a wait. You'll find the application in the description here. If I see your application and it looks good, I'll get you in as soon as I can. Could be up to a month. I don't know. We fill up, so I'll do my best. All right. This chart I'm going to share with you is something that I was exposed to in Eastern medicine school. This is where my background is. I'm a clinical herbalist with a lot of acupuncture experience and Eastern medical training. And back in the day when I was going through school, they showed us a lot of these charts. And these charts are so interesting because we start to see a pattern emerging in terms of how our body wants to be treated during the day. And the idea here is as a longevity practice, as a way to have better living, or what they call yangshan in Eastern medicine. The idea is to live with nature and to try to follow the internal nature of your body and outside your body in terms of the seasons, where you live, and find harmony there so that you can get more vitality. Now, when we have complex chronic health conditions, this is all the more important, right? So this is an art for people who would consider themselves healthy, right? They need to be doing this too. Most times people aren't. Right? Because if you're healthy, you kind of ignore this stuff and you just get by with breaking a lot of rules and there's no consequences, right? Until later when it catches up. If you have a complex chronic health condition, you don't have that luxury. So you need to know these things so that you can maximize the energy you're putting into your day and getting as healthy as possible as a return from that. So again, I've spoken about temporal arbitrage in other videos. This part 1 has a great explanation there. So go there and look. Now the chart we get is a circadian chart, and every 2 hours of the 24 hours of the day is dedicated to one organ in the body. Okay, one organ, one channel. Because in Chinese medicine, we have the channels. So if you've ever had acupuncture or you've been kind of familiar with some of these things, the channels and the points will have an organ name to them. So for example, the lung channel, right? Well, technically starts in the middle of the body, but it emerges kind of up here in the chest and it goes down your arm and then it winds up on your thumb. And all the points along that channel have names. They're all very poetic and nice names. And they're also having names that have numerical values to them. So like lung 1, lung 2, lung 3. It's more of a technical way to understand the points on the channel. The channel and the organ are associated and connected, right? The channel and the organ are not only responsible for the physical health of that organ, like the lung, but also for some of the energetics, like the job of that organ, right? Now the lung's going to have different types of jobs depending on which piece you're looking at, but there's different functions to it. And each organ has its own different functions. For example, the liver, right? is not only the physical liver in the body, but it also has to do with the ability of your body to not be stagnant. And we start to see that with the liver's function in terms of filtration and detoxification pathways, all the activity the liver has in terms of breaking things down. That helps to prevent the stagnation, right? But we also have an emotion with the liver, like frustration and anger. That can, when the liver starts to get backed up, that's an emotion that can come along. I'm not going to try to go through every single organ in this video, but that's the idea. You start to look at these whole systems. The lung is the same kind of thing. It's got the actual job of the lung has to do with breathing, inhaling air, right? And then getting that air and taking the energy out of that air and putting that energy into our body. Makes sense, right? The lung also has this ability to breathe out waste products. The lung also is connected to the immune system. It's part of what we would consider protecting us, right? Having this this layer of what they call it like wei qi, right? It means the energy on the outside of your body, where your boundaries are, right? So the lung has a lot to do with immune activity. The lung has to do with grief and sadness. The lung has the ability to let go of the breath we don't need. The lung has the ability to let go of grief, right? Let go when we lose people. There's a lot of correlations and correspondences here, and you're going to want to go a little bit deeper. I'm not going to cover all these in depth in this. This would be an incredibly long video if I did this. But the idea here is I want you to, when you look at this chart, it's not just about the physical organ, the lung, the liver, the kidney, the spleen, right? There's also the way that those organs and their systems manifest and add value to our lives. They're going to come in different flavors. So the lung has to do with more grief, sadness, inspiration, right? The liver's got to do more with anger and the ability to cultivate the opposite of anger, which is patience, right? The kidneys have to do with fear, and then not only fear, but the opposite of fear, which is courage or just having faith, right? To get you through that. This is how we're looking at these things. The spleen goes with worry, right? Overthinking, and also just acceptance and being able to be with the unknown, right? And just understand that we don't have to know every little detail. The heart, right, has to do with connection, passion, right? But also how you kind of cloak yourself and don't let yourself have intimate connections, right? That balance of who you let in and who you don't. Sometimes that can be off, right? There's a lot of things like that. So when we look at this chart, we're not just looking at the physical organs, right? But it's important to understand that there's 12 organs in Eastern medicine, and each one gets 2 hours on the chart. So depending on where you are in the day, you're going to have optimal times where you can do things for that organ or for the theme of that organ, where you're going to get more bang for your buck than if you try to do the same activity at a different time when a different organ is more awake and more active. This is where the arbitrage comes in. When you start to understand this, you can start to structure your day. And of course, this is a starting point. This isn't the be-all end-all of how you need to live your life, but this is a starting point so that you can start to create your own rhythms and your own routines based on your body's nature. And maybe you find that you don't match the chart completely. Maybe you try living by the chart and it doesn't work quite well. There's little spots where you'd rather rearrange something and do one task later or something like that. Great. Now you're using this as a point of departure and you're starting to figure things out for yourself, right? Perfect. So we'll start at 11 p.m., right? And that's where gallbladder time kicks in. Now, the idea here is the gallbladder and the liver kind of work together. And you want to be, if possible, you want to be asleep by 11. Unconscious, right? Just zonked, snoring, right? By 11. Not at 11 o'clock, I'm thinking about brushing my teeth. I'm going to just finish reading. None of this. Try to set yourself up so that you're at least asleep before 11 p.m., right? At the latest. That's the idea here. So at 11 starts when you ought to be asleep because you're going to get the most bang out of that sleep because your gallbladder and then the next one is your liver. They're working on detoxifying and doing all this like healing work while you're sleeping, right? So from 11 to 1, gallbladder time, 1 to 3 is liver time. Now 3 to 5 is when it starts to turn into lung time. Ideally, if you went to sleep even earlier than 11, maybe around 5 or 6, you're starting to wake up. Right? You're starting to get some of that inspiration because the lung and the large intestine, which comes next, which you can see the chart, the lung and the large intestine, which comes next, is more about starting to wake up. And we have this thing where we're supposed to get some cortisol. We're supposed to get some stress hormones coming in around 5, should be kind of peaking up to wake you up, right? This process starts around 2 a.m. We start generating more cortisol during liver time. Liver has to do with stress. Cortisol is a stress hormone, doesn't make it bad, right? But that stress hormone is rising until it hits a threshold sometime during lung time, ideally to wake you up. Now it's really interesting because we have lung time and large intestine times right there afterwards. So sometime between 3 and 7 a.m., you should be waking up and having a bowel movement, right? It's large intestine time. The lung has to do with letting go. The large intestine has to do with letting go. When you wake up, it's time to get rid of all the stuff you don't need so you can start your day ready for action and not just dragging around a bunch of old stool, right? This whole chart, you can start to extrapolate this throughout the day. It's really quite interesting. If you're a little more old school and you want to be very pragmatic with this, you could say, okay, I'm going to wake up and lung time ends at 5. So if I can wake up a little bit before 5, you don't have to be super rigid with this, right? But somewhere in that neighborhood, around 5, maybe 6. And what I'm going to do are some breathing exercises. So when I wake up, I'm going to start using my lungs, right? I'm going to catch that tail end of lung time and really maximize the fact that these are ready to go now. And I'm going to do some breath work, maybe a little bit of yoga or qigong, something like that. And then go visit the toilet for large intestine time, have that bowel movement, right? And then we have, maybe take a walk, something like that, get some fresh air. That way you can be getting your sunlight coming in, you can be getting some exposure there and kind of tuning yourself to your local circadian rhythm. And then you're going to go, oh, it's just about stomach and spleen time. So somewhere in there, in that 4-hour window, right, from 7 to 11 would be a good time to have breakfast, right? So the lung goes 3 to 5, large intestine goes 5 to 7, and then from 7 to 9 is stomach, 9 to 11 is spleen. Those are both digestive organs. Great time to have a little bit of breakfast somewhere in there. Now people look at this and they go, hey, when am I supposed to actually get any work done? Right? Well, you can get work done anywhere in there. It's not going to take 4 hours to eat breakfast, right? It's not going to take 2 hours to sit on the toilet during large intestine time and have a bowel movement. You just get the little activity in there, somewhere in that window, and that would be great. And then you move on, right? So of course, if you go from 7:30, something like that, you have a little breakfast, now you've got some time to do some work. Now the spleen, as we get into that spleen time, the spleen is really good for attention and focus. So you may notice you have a little breakfast and then from 9 to 11, 9 to 12, something like that, you can stretch out a little bit past the actual time, right? But you're getting the activity there. Maybe that's a good time for focus. It's a good time for work. It's a good time for creativity, or you're working on writing a book. So that's a good time to sit down and write. Or maybe you're studying, right? This is a good time if you're in school or learning things. It's a good time to absorb information. It's a good mental time. Because your spleen has to do not only with the actual, it's over here, the actual spleen itself, but your ability to have your intellect and your attention kind of dialed in, right? And then we have heart time, which is going to go from 11 to 1, which covers noon. And maybe you're going to have a little bit of lunch, of course, right? You can eat during heart time. It's not the end of the world. But that may also be a time to do something kind of fun and connecting. Maybe that's time to talk to somebody, catch up with somebody on the phone, or have maybe you're going to have lunch, but it's going to be with a friend, right? Because your heart is not just the physical organ that is in your in your chest pumping blood along. It also has to do with your ability to connect with other people and to create, right? So the heart has to do with also, there's this whole thing with intimacy, right? And it's like letting people in, but also letting ideas out. The ability to have inspiration come in, and then you get creative and you channel that and you manifest it out, whether it's through painting or sharing things conversationally or writing or whatever it is, making music. So the heart's a good time, right? Heart time's a good time to be creative and to be connected, which is kind of the same thing. It's really interesting when you start looking at that, like social connection and creativity. It's both an act of intimacy. Right? So you can do that during that time, and maybe that would be a really nice time in the day to do that. Then we have small intestine time from 1 to 3, and then we go to urinary bladder from 3 to 5, and kidney from 5 to 7. So sometimes people get tired in the afternoons, right? Depends on what you eat for lunch. Depends on your energy level. Depends on a lot of things, really. If you're addicted to caffeine, that can play a role there. One of the things I like to see, I'm kind of skipping through small intestine and urinary bladder because there's not a ton that you have to do here that's going to specifically dictate your day, right? It's not like, okay, you need to wait for bladder time so you can pee. Of course, you're going to be peeing at different times of the day. But all this is getting to kidney time, right? And what I would offer is that the kidneys tend to be this like deep reserve of energy. And if you're somebody who is a napper, you're probably going to find that having your nap around somewhere between 3 to 5, like before kidney time really takes off, is a good chance to recharge your kidneys. You don't want to be taking a nap after that because that can throw you off for when you're trying to go to bed. But if you look at these cultures that do siestas, right, that kind of afternoonish time where the sun's already peaked and then you're getting the kind of warmest part of the day, and then that's a good chance to take some of that extra energy and you just charge your battery, right? So you go to sleep, take a little nap if you're a napper. If you're not a napper, don't worry about it. Go about your day as usual. And of course, this chart isn't meant to control your life. This chart is to help you navigate. It's just to give you a framework, and you can start to plug in other things. Maybe you find that afternoon shift, right? Maybe you're doing something where you go, okay, I'm going to have a little bit of lunch. I'm going to socialize and catch up with somebody that I haven't spoken to in a while. And after that, you're feeling kind of inspired and you're feeling connected to other people. And now it's a good time to be a little more introverted and do some reading or whatever you want to do, right? So find a time that works and find something to do during that time that works for you. Don't be just like married to this chart. I'm giving you a place to start. But what I would say is the thing with the kidney right around 5 is if you're going to take a nap, try to do it right before that kidney time so that you can get charged up, right? And then you're not getting kind of drained and drawing off your kidney power when you're already tired for the day, because then it's going to be hard to go through the evening, right? So we have that. And then it goes small intestine, bladder, kidney, and then we have the pericardium, right? Which is this muscular wrapper that's around the heart, right? And the whole thing with the pericardium is they call it the heart protector. Now, I'm not going to get too into like what you should be doing during pericardium time, but if you're getting your day kind of set up in this way with this framework, you've got a lot of room to play around. You can do research around pericardium. I don't honestly think it's a huge deal. I think that kidney point is one of the most important spots around 5 p.m. is one of the most important spots of the day, just to make sure you're not napping after that. Right? But then of course you could be making some dinner, having some dinner, and then winding down, because what's coming ultimately is going to be that 11 p.m. gallbladder time. So I'm not getting into the weeds on every single thing, but I am showing you a structure and a rhythm that's been around for thousands of years. And while we have this great research coming out, which is wonderful, showing about circadian rhythm and how we have cells in our skin that can detect sunlight and all these things, it's fantastic, right? To live by the sun. It's great, of course. But also we've got a more detailed map that's a lot older. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to rely on research all the time because we have cultural history and a cultural legacy. It's really interesting, like eating food. You're optimized to be eating food during the day. That's when your digestive organs are more active, right? Spleen time, stomach time, these kinds of things. All the intestines, right? Large intestine, small intestine, they're all active during the day. It's not at midnight is when your stomach is active, right? So eating, you want to be arbitraging these activities. So eating is going to be, if you eat after 11, it's going to be much less efficient, right? Which also means it could cause more problems. It could be more of a stage 2 trigger, like a digestive trigger. You could get more food stagnation because you're eating at a time when your body's not optimized to be releasing more enzymes and it's not in a digestive mode. So you need to think about this stuff and try to match it, because you can see on the back end of the day, liver, gallbladder, this stuff's all internal that's happening. Your lungs have to do with your immune system. Your immune system's working a lot while you're sleeping. This isn't like eating time. And same thing. So people see this chart and they go, well, when should I exercise? I want to lift weights. Probably in the morning, right? If you look at that, you're getting that kind of, you're coming off the tail end of the lung energy, right? You should have some vitality, right? And that could be if you want to lift some weights or you want to do whatever it is, right? Walking or yoga, again, lung time, right? Or thereabouts, as close as you can get, because you're going to be losing some conversion, right? It's less efficient on your body if you get outside of that window too much. So you can think about these things, you can play around with them. It's a really cool way to start to structure your day. What else gets interesting is if we look at how to structure a week. Now in the part 1 of this video, I spoke about waiting tables and how there's a weekly rhythm, right? And I was even in that video hinting about this kind of thing, because we have not just a daily cycle, but we have a weekly cycle based on our systems of how we live. So maybe there's a weekly rhythm you can find too, where it's like, okay, towards the weekend is a different energy than a Tuesday in my life. How's that going to work? How do I layer my activities so that I can be getting the most out of my week? And then we have monthly cycles, right? Around the full moon, the new moon, women that are menstruating, this is more obvious, right? What's going on with your body, how that's changing, and can you start to scale and tailor your activities in a fractal way, zooming out into larger and larger periods of time? Is there an annual rhythm, right? What kinds of exercise should you be doing in the summer versus in the winter? Is it different? Maybe you want to eat foods you're eating during spleen or stomach time every morning. Great, right? You're keeping that daily rhythm set up. But there's a variation throughout the year because the things you're eating in the winter, even though it's at the same time of day, are different than the things you're eating in the summer, even though it's at the same time of day. And you're getting some variance that way. Same thing with our life, the human lifespan. We go through these same types of processes. There's a circadian rhythm for the human life, right? The things that and this is something that we all know this intuitively, right? Because you may hear advice or you may have given advice where you meet somebody. I remember being 18 and having people older than me. I was at 18, I was going to go travel. I backpacked around, went around Europe, Australia. I did all this stuff. I took a gap year, right? To kind of figure out who I was a little bit. And people who heard my plan that I was going to go and do all this, they said, oh, do it while you're young, right? That's the best time in your life to do this stuff. Do it while you're young, right? Why? Because not all hours, right, are the same. Hours don't interchange, right? They're not all the same thing. Same thing with years. You could spend 6 months in your early 20s doing something that if you tried to spend that same 6 months in your 60s, it would be a whole different deal, and vice versa, right? There are some things that are really well suited for where you're in later stages of life, and you're better suited to do certain things than when you're very young, right? There's timing. Timing is everything, and you want to try to find the timing, not only in your day, right, in your week, in your month, in your year, but also in your life cycle, and try to see, what am I doing with my life? Am I aiming my life at something that's appropriate for where I am in all these stages? It becomes a very deep self-conversation, but I want to give you something to start with. I want to give you something tangible. So you've got the chart, right? You've got the circadian chart. You can do some research about what these organs mean. You can go into more depth on that. But again, I've done this in a way where I've kind of been not exactly rigid, and I've skipped over some things, and I've done that on purpose because I want to introduce these ideas and at the same time demonstrate and model that it's okay to deviate from them somewhat and not be just rigid and dialed in, right? This is a starting point, but it's a solid starting point. So I hope that helps you. Let's get you feeling better. Cheers.